Is Dubai, or more specifically the UAE, on the verge of collapse? I had a bunch of comments under a video that we recently did about how the standards for the golden visa were being dropped dramatically in the case of UAE, and people were suggesting, all sorts of different problems. I've interestingly seen a lot of comments about negative sides of Dubai, etc., and negative sides of UAE. And I figured I would take some time to dive into, is this true? What's really the mechanics of what's going on behind the scenes? Are they desperate? Are they needing to prop up the real estate industry? Have they massively overbuilt, etc.? We're going to talk about that today. Before we do, if you haven't already, please hit the subscribe button, hit the all notification bell. If you like these videos, give it a thumbs up, share it with your friends. If you'd like help with relocating abroad, setting up businesses in other countries, getting second citizenships, optimizing your global tax, etc., please reach out to us. You can book a call, calendly.com/Michael-Rosmer. There's a link in the description below, or send a message to our websites, offshorecitizen.net and offshorecapitalist.com. Okay, so let's see here. Let's start, I guess, with the thing that I find kind of interesting. And to me, this is the main point of interest in all these comments, which is there is a lot of negative news that gets put out about Dubai and UAE. And most of it is not very credible. Now, there are some things that are quite credible. For example, there's air quality issues in UAE, and so that's something they have to work on, etc. If you were to say that, the way they've organized their roads is not efficient, and that's something, sure, you could criticize that. If you want to say that it's really hot in the summer, yes, you could criticize that. But it's interesting, I was having a conversation with my wife the other day, and we were discussing how she said, before coming to Dubai, she was concerned about all these rules, concerned about, had all these ideas, and now she doesn't think about them at all. And she feels absolutely none of those restrictions. And I find it interesting that there seems to be a lot of narrative from abroad, from people who are not in UAE, who've never lived in UAE, negative towards UAE. And I wonder to what extent there's some kind of like a propaganda machine driving it. I'll give you another example. I had somebody I was talking to back a number of months ago who was from Germany, and they were saying, oh, there's all these restrictions due to COVID in Dubai. And I was like, what are you talking about? I was like, no restrictions. Aside from wearing masks, there's no restrictions. She's like, oh, no, we were told all this. And I was like, no, that's all completely false. And anyway, so she was like, oh, we've been lied to. So you get some of these cases where it seems like there is some sort of a misinformation campaign that is put out for whatever reason. And, then you can kind of start building narratives around this. So let's just talk about, first of all, the real estate situation, because this is one of the ones that you could tie into the golden visa. And, I could understand where somebody could say, oh, why are they lowering this? Why would they lower the requirements, etc. So first of all, let's just deal with the concerns that Dubai has had chronic oversupply, which is something that I certainly was concerned about for quite a while. Now, I've reviewed the history of projects, number of units released, compared it to the number of people who are arriving into the country, or rather the population increase over time, etc. And I can tell you, it was really, really bad in 2008. If you go and look at the number of projects, it's not a surprise that the real estate market crashed at that time, because the number of projects they were putting out then was something like, I can't remember, 10 times more than is being put out today. Like a very large number. Okay, I'll see if I can link the details below. So, obviously that resulted in some issues. 2014, when they also had some issues, they not nearly as bad as in 2008, but they were kind of overbuilding. The government of UAE has stated they're very aware of the possibilities of overbuilding, and they're doing things to control it. And if you look at the numbers of projects, the number of units coming onto the market, it is really not crazy at all. It's far, far, far lower than you would have seen in some of those previous times. It's pretty reasonable. On top of that, if you look, the UAE population was growing by about 45,000 people per year. It's accelerated in the last little while. But comparing that to the number of units coming on to the market, et cetera, it's really within reasonable proportion. So no concerns there. Likewise, far from the markets being on the verge of collapse. I mean, If I look at rental properties and the amounts that rents have gone up over the last while, it's pretty crazy. Somewhere around 50% rental increase in various properties I've followed from around November until the present, so about over the last 6 months, which is nuts, right? Like very, very high, almost to the point in some cases of being double. So like 50+% rise in some of these cases. So you've got that. I have a client I was talking to recently who's debating buying the unit he was in or one of the units in the building because he's no longer allowed to stay there. They want to, kick him out, and they'll probably end up raising the rents again. So you've got this sort of thing going on. At the same time, real estate prices have gone up a lot over the last 2 years. I mean, this is pretty normal across a bunch of areas, but there is a little reason to believe that these are going to take a big dive. And this is purely based on the number of people who are coming in and the supply. If you look at what occurred in 2020, the IMF had projected that global direct investment worldwide would decrease by 40% in 2020. In Dubai or in UAE, it increased 42%. So it gives you some idea of how successful they've been at attracting people, attracting capital, etc. And so you can ask the question then of, all right, why is it that they would want to lower the golden visa cost for people to get in from 10 million dirhams, then to 5 million, now to 2 million? And I think this is pretty apparent. There's a few different factors at work. One is they have a 20-year plan which involves doubling the population of Dubai. Okay, so by 2040, they expect to double the population of the city, and of course, then there's halo surrounding areas in the other Emirates and what all is going on there. This requires bringing in quite a lot of people, right? They have a program to bring in 100,000 developers. They're trying to expand and create green tech visas or green passes for people with certain backgrounds. They've created digital nomad programs. They're doing things for people who have high education, PhDs, etc., retirement plans, etc. So that's a big thing. The second thing is they're working very hard as part of this plan to have people consider Dubai their long-time home and stay. This is part of their policy. It's one of the reasons why they opened up to the possibility that they will give citizenships to certain foreigners. It has been a long trajectory or a long trend that people would come to Dubai and to UAE to work. They might be in the country for 10 years, but then they would realize they were going back to their home country. And this has an effect on the culture of a place, right? So a big part of their mandate is to say, come and stay, make this your home. So this is part of encouraging that. Now, in addition to that, of course, the golden visa doesn't just apply to Dubai, it applies to surrounding Emirates. And so I imagine that this makes those Emirates somewhat more attractive because they don't have the variety of higher end properties that are going to meet this. Third of all, frankly, 10 million dirhams is a pretty high bar if we compare it to almost anywhere else, right? So you're talking about around 2.5 million euros, around a little bit less than that. If I was to compare, what do I have to invest in order to get residency in Ireland, which is a very top tier place, you're talking about 1 million euros, right? If I was to look at what I would have to get in some place like New Zealand, you're kind of in a similar ballpark to these UAE, and it's pretty restrictive. If I was to look at an EB5 visa in the US, it's more than double. If I was to look at when Canada had their investor visa, more than like about triple, maybe even 4 times. So like you're kind of bringing in standard with the global marketplace. It's not an unreasonable thing to suggest. At this point, you're talking about, okay, I bring it down to 2 million dirhams. That puts us in around 500,000 euros approximately. This puts you in line with Portugal, puts you in line with Spain, places like this. So again, just like really not out of whack overall. And I think generally in keeping with the mandate that they're trying to create in the country. So that would be the deal. I think as a general rule, I would say when you hear negative things about UAE, it's usually not the case. Like for whatever reason, it's a place that gets a lot of bad press, and usually in a way that is pretty false. And so I've had multiple people who have come and relocated here. We help people every single month, as you know, I mean, we help people form companies and get residencies all over the world, but a lot in UAE over the last, I don't know, year and a half in particular. And I can tell you very frequently I have the experience of people coming and they show up and they're like, wow, this is great. And wow, my preconceptions of how it would be, it's not that. And it's like really, really normal. So that would be my thoughts. If you are interested, you can, you know, come and visit, check it out and see what you think. Obviously no place is for everybody. So definitely there is plenty of good reasons to go somewhere else. I interviewed somebody recently who recently moved to Bahamas, and you know, he was talking about, well, he has asthma and wouldn't have been good, you know, perfectly valid, right? So he went to some place where there's great clean air and all this. So to each their own. But I do think it is very much worth checking out to see what places are good for you and then deciding accordingly. Let me know what you guys think, put it in the comments below, and I will look forward to seeing you on the next video.